Number 1. A few years ago now, when my wife was pregnant with our first daughter, she was browsing Craigslist when she came across some maternity clothes for a cheap price. She sent an email to the seller, who went by the name of Jenny, and they agreed to meet at Jenny's place to do the exchange. We were supposed to go and pick up the clothes together, but on the day of the deal, my wife was suffering with some extreme morning sickness. She sent me out to pick up the clothes, and me, not being a complete idiot, asked my pal, Big Bernie, to come along with me. He's 6'4", hence the nickname. I wasn't expecting trouble, but two safer than one, and you can never be too careful. Bernie agrees, and even offers to drive us down in his truck, on the condition that I pay for the gas and a 6-pack of beer. We hit the road at around midday, and it should only be a 30-minute drive. We joke around, sing along to the radio, and discuss future plans. A few minutes from the end of the journey, I notice that the closer we're getting to our destination, the further we're getting from civilization. The turning to the place is coming up on the left, and it's an old run-down farmhouse in essentially the middle of nowhere. Nothing but dirt and brush in either direction for at least half a mile. And even then, the closest buildings are other rundown farmhouses too. Some people would call it horribly isolated, and others would call it paradise. At that moment, we thought it was ominous. As we pull into what I hasten to call a driveway, we both question whether this is really the right house. Bernie double checks on the map to confirm. Sure enough, this is the woman's house. We're not too worried though, since it's still daylight and there are two of us. We exit the vehicle. We're greeted by some heavy-set dude who was waiting on the porch, and he introduces himself as the man of the house. Immediately, I can tell there's something bothering him. He asks me where my wife is, and I tell him that she couldn't make it. He motions for us to come inside, saying that his wife has the clothes ready for us to pick up. My warning signals are starting to blink as we approach the house. This doesn't seem like the sort of place that even has a phone, let alone internet connection to post a Craigslist ad. As we step inside, there's a room off the hallway with some commotion going on inside. Standing in a room completely void of any furniture are about 7 other burly men, just standing around in a sort of semicircle. Now, this is creepy as all hell. What the fuck would all these greasy guys be doing with a bunch of clothes for a pregnant woman? They all turn to look at us as we poke our heads in, all with the same expression on their face. Disappointment. They weren't hillbillies exactly, but they were of a similar breed. Put it this way, you could tell just by looking at them that they were trouble. Every fiber of my being is screaming that we need to get the fuck out of there right away. But social etiquette is a hell of a powerful thing. So when the main guy said to follow him into the kitchen for the clothes, we did. He led us into a decrepit kitchen, again completely empty, other than a few broken down appliances. You got the money? I reply with a yes, but I'm hesitant to get my wallet out in front of this guy. He picks up some dirty rag and extends it out to me, like this is the thing I'm supposed to be buying. No, that's not what we came here for. He stares at me, with some creepy, excited-looking smile on his face, and it becomes obvious that there were never any clothes for sale in the first place. Unsure of how to respond, Bernie takes control and says, "Yeah, hold on, we'll go and get the money." An obvious lie, but good enough that this guy doesn't question us. Instead, he just stands there, with that same damn expression plastered across his ugly face. As we exit the farmhouse, we can see that all of the men who were in the other room are now leaning against Bernie's truck. Some of them are even rummaging through the things he keeps on the back. Now we know for sure that these guys aren't gonna let us go without a fight. Fuck. We're slowly walking back towards the truck, and I'm hoping to God that Bernie's got a plan. He's thinking the same thing I am, and without words, we give each other that universal look of shit. My memory of all of this comes back to me in slow motion. Bernie whispers for me to stay cool and approaches the guys who are rummaging through the truck. We're outnumbered, and for all we know, outgunned, so rather than confront these hillbilly wannabe bastards, Bernie instead tells them about the power tools on the back seat. They start crowding around and digging about back there, proving just the distraction we needed. We both fucking dart into the nearby tree line. Forget the van, forget the tools. We just have to get the hell out of there and away from these creeps. We keep going until we think they're a good distance behind us, and then we lay low for a while, desperately searching for cell phone signal. After a while in the woods, we hear people approaching, and we take cover in the thicket. Bernie arms himself with a rock from the ground, and I follow suit. We're both praying that this isn't the cast of Deliverance descending upon us, but rather some decent folk who just so happen to be out for a walk or something. But as we hear their screeching and hollering, that illusion is shattered. We can't tell how many of them have chased us out this far, but it's clearly them. And what's worse, what really made my blood curdle with unprecedented fear, was the sound of something else that got louder as they got closer. The sound of Bernie's fucking DeWalt power drill, buzzing. One of those battery-powered ones. Now my imagination's kicked into overdrive with what might happen if they catch us, and all we've got to fight them off with is a couple of rocks. We remain silent long after these guys pass us by, just to make sure they were long gone. Eventually we found a signal, and called the police, who take their sweet-ass time to get to the location. When they finally do arrive, the place was empty. All of their vehicles were gone, as were all of Bernie's tools inside of the van, which had taken a beating as well. It still ran though, so we were able to get back home. Thankfully, Bernie kept his hands on the keys. Turns out, that building really was abandoned, and not one of those guys lived there. We never heard anything else about it from the cops. What I think is really messed up is that these guys lured us out there with the promise of maternity clothes, meaning that they intentionally wanted their victims to be a couple of prospective parents. I'm thankful every day that my wife didn't come with me. Her pregnant self wouldn't have been able to get away quick enough, and we would have been at the mercy of those guys. There's no way I could have fought them off. Hell, I couldn't even with Big Bernie on my side. My daughter was born shortly after this incident, healthy and beautiful, and thankfully, she won't have to grow up without her father. The sound of power drills still brings back those memories. Number 2. My money situation hasn't been the best lately. With rent and bills to pay, it's been a struggle. In my attempt to make ends meet though, I met someone I wish I hadn't. A few nights ago, I saw an ad on Craigslist, looking for someone to help move a few large items and boxes up from the basement. The job offered $12 an hour, cash, and estimated to be around 5 to 7 hours worth of work. That sounded great to me, and best of all, it was within walking distance of my house. I emailed the poster of the ad, and everything seemed great at first. He was thankful that someone had answered so quickly, because he really needed to get things done. After a few emails though, he hits me with something. I want you to know that I'm a gay man. How old are you, by the way? That's a weird message to send. His sexuality should be none of my business. If you call up a plumber to come to your house, you don't share that information with him. I'm a 28-year-old guy though. I'm in good shape, and I never leave the house without a knife in my boot and a sidearm on my waist. I need the money, and this guy's 68. If he tries anything, I'm confident I can handle myself. Besides that, I like to think the best of people. I try and tell myself that maybe he's just a bit flamboyant and has had trouble in the past hiring people who turned out to be homophobic. The time comes and I get to his house. He comes off as a normal and pleasant dude right from the bat. He's polite and friendly and has a really cool house. It's your typical middle-class New England home from the early 40s. Not something I'd want to live in because you're so closed off with smaller rooms, but they have a nice charm. He's even furnished it with antiques from the time period. So, I'm put a little at ease with everything going so well at first. He takes me down into the basement, and it is a bit creepy. Let's be honest here, most basements are. Even more so when it belongs to a stranger. He shows me what needs to be done, and I start getting to work. Everything goes fine for the first hour or so. Then I notice out of the corner of my eye, he's watching me from around the corner. I try and tell myself it's no big deal. He just wants to make sure I'm not stealing any of his stuff, and that I'm doing what I'm supposed to. After a few minutes, he goes away. About 30 minutes later, he comes strolling in wearing nothing but underwear and socks. "Oh, sorry," he says. "I was just about to take a shower, and I forgot to tell you a few things." Well, that wasn't really the case, as he just repeats something he told me earlier. He's 68 though. Can't expect him to remember everything, right? A little more time goes by, and he calls me from upstairs and tells me to come and take a break and have a glass of water. Sounds good to me. I get upstairs, walk into the living room, and he's sitting on the couch, completely naked. I freeze a bit, and he says, "Is this okay with you?" I told him that I already informed him I was straight, and if this is what he was looking for, he hired the wrong person. He starts apologizing and puts his little buddy away, and begs me to please finish the job, saying that he didn't mean to make me feel uncomfortable. Again, I need the money, so I agree. I figure there's no way this guy could overpower me, and he has no idea I'm carrying. I get back to work, and everything's fine for another couple of hours. I go back upstairs once the job's done to let him know. He tells me no problem, and to have a seat while he goes and gets the money. I sit down, and take out my phone to browse the internet while I wait. After a few minutes, I just know he's right next to me. It's something most people always manage to realize. I don't know the science behind it, if there is any. I didn't consciously see or hear anything, but maybe your brain picks up on little cues subconsciously. Either way, I turn behind me, and there he is, dick out, going to town on it. I admit I freeze a bit from the shock of it. He reaches out and puts his hand on my shoulder. Now, this is probably what creeped me out the most. With his hand on my shoulder, he leans in a little towards me, smiles and says, "Now, don't go and tell anyone what you've just seen, okay? This is just our little secret. Nobody needs to know about it, right?" That's not a line that should come to your mind if a 28-year-old is your normal victim. That's the kind of thing you get used to saying after doing shit like this to fucking kids. At that point, I jumped up, told him to give me the money he owes me, and started towards the door. He hands me the money while still jerking off, and says again, "Don't forget, it's our secret." A few hours pass, and I receive an email from him. "Thank you for what you did for me today. I feel as though we bonded and connected on a very special level. This was a wonderful day I'll never forget. I have more work for you tomorrow. Maybe you'll learn to enjoy watching me share my private moments with you." I didn't respond. Number 3. A few semesters ago, I was TAing a class that ended around 10 PM. After that, I usually spent around 30 minutes cleaning up the lab and then had a 30-minute drive, so I was usually home around 11 or shortly thereafter. One evening, as I pulled into my neighbourhood, I noticed a large pickup truck with a trailer sitting on a stoplight on the street perpendicular to mine. There was a woman standing outside of the truck talking to someone, maybe the driver or maybe a neighbour. This immediately struck me as odd, because my neighbourhood is in a tiny town of only a few hundred people, most of whom have young kids. This means that nobody is ever out of their house after maybe 9 PM, and certainly not walking around talking. As I drove past, the woman walked to the other side of the truck and got in. As I pulled up to the curb in front of my house, I noticed the truck had followed me. They pulled partly into the driveway of my next door neighbour. That neighbour doesn't have a truck, and isn't usually up that late because of the kids. But I wasn't too worried yet. They had moved in only a month or so earlier, so I figured they must be borrowing a truck and a trailer from a friend to finish the move. I walked quickly across my yard and locked the front door behind me like I always do. It was only a few seconds later that my doorbell rang. Still thinking that my neighbour was the one in the truck, I assumed he had seen me drop something in the yard and wanted to let me know. Now comes the stupid part. My boyfriend was in the back part of the basement at the time, and the doorbell isn't audible down there. To get to the basement, I had to walk right past the front door, which has a pane of glass in it. I would be visible to whoever was outside. So, instead of letting him know that someone was at the door, I just answered it. It wasn't my neighbour. It was a woman in her 30s. The truck had backed out of my neighbour's driveway and was now parked in the middle of the street, still running, but with its lights off. Standing around the truck were 4 or 5 big, burly men, slowly walking towards me. Red flags went off instantly. "We're here to see those couches from Craigslist. Mind if we come in?" She took a step towards me, but by then I knew something was up. "You've got the wrong house," I said, and I slammed the door as hard as I could and locked it. At this point, my boyfriend had heard me talking to someone and flipped on a basement light that was visible from the front yard. Up till then, the house had looked dark and empty from the street. I ran downstairs, told him the short version, and we each grabbed a weapon. When it was clear that the people weren't coming back, I called the sheriff, and they took a full report and drove around the small town to see if the truck was still around. I really prayed that they would find these guys at another house nearby, loading couches into their truck, because that would mean it was just an honest mistake. Just to be sure, I checked Craigslist myself. And as I feared, there were no couches or anything else for sale within 20 miles. I later learned that this was a common MO of criminals. Stake out a quiet neighbourhood and wait until a single woman comes home alone. Have a female accomplice make up an excuse to get her to open the door, and bam. I don't know if they just wanted to rob the house or even worse, but I'm very glad I wasn't home alone. And to this day, I don't answer the door unless I'm armed. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you missed my Valentine's Day horror special, then it's right there on the screen. Just give it a little click. Purge your home of all demonic presences by dropping a like on this video, and I'll have another one coming for you guys very, very soon. Stay spooky, and remember, the best things happen in the dark.